Hello, my name's Andy. Welcome to episode 26 of Keeping Water. In this week's episode, I have January's Underwater Watch, where I'll show how the fish have been responding to the decreasing temperatures. I'll give a brief update on how well the filter floss is working, and take a brief look at the first 6 months of the channel. Once again, thank you to all the new subscribers. I've had a little surge over the last week, which is very rewarding. Thanks also to everyone who takes time to watch, like and comment. I've not been that well over the last couple of weeks, so I haven't replied as quickly or as often as I'd like, but I do really appreciate the feedback. If you've not already subscribed, please consider it. I release videos at least once a week and have a number of projects around the pond coming up in 2021. I also post regularly to other forms of social media, including Instagram and Twitter. Links can be found in the description below. Right, let's get started. These last 4 weeks have seen a really significant decrease in temperature. With no heating or cold barrier on the pond, the water at times has slowly followed the air temps down towards, but not quite reaching, zero. The 5 larger fish, especially the tench, have spent more time shoaled closely together, although the carp, led unsurprisingly by Mira, have still explored the pond from time to time, occasionally looking for food, although I've not been feeding at all while the water has been sub 5 degrees. This footage, filmed on the 20th of December, was the last time I fed them. Although all the tench and carp were quite keen to feed, it wasn't long after this that the water dropped from an average of 3 to 5 degrees to 1 to 2.5, and that was too low for me to be offering any food, regardless of the carp occasionally looking keen. One thing I noticed through this filming was the absence of any flicking that the carp occasionally do when feeding on the bottom. In lieu of a better reason, I'm putting this down to there being less detritus on the floor of the pond, now I have the pond vac, which therefore doesn't get into their gills and cause irritation. The rudd, as you can see, continued to be active while showing no interest in feeding. More on this later. As you'll see, the tench often pick up pellets but spit them out, although the male less so. I will also highlight at this point that the smaller female appears to be healing slowly around her mouth and tail, which is good to see. I think the carp especially are clearly associating the camera with food, as I do tend to feed near to it when I'm filming, and they'll often focus their search for food around it when they've finished the available pellets. They searched for more food for quite a long time after feeding, which showed, I think, a healthy appetite. However, to protect their digestion and the filters, I only gave limited amounts. I haven't been offering floating pellets at all recently, partly because I don't have any floating wheat germ, and also as part of my more naturalistic feeding regime, which I'll talk more about as we get into spring and summer. I think this part of the video really shows that, despite the low temps, the small female tench is really starting to heal up well around her mouth. Here's Mira again nosing around the camera to see if there's more food. There wasn't, just the odd piece of leaf and stick that the vac had missed. This shot is interesting as it shows something I'd not seen before. There's a piece of liner that I'd used unsuccessfully to hide the rock that keeps the pipework in position, and Koira, clearly still being hungry, is determined here to find something underneath it. Late on Christmas Day, I filmed some test footage at night with my underwater light. As you may have seen in a previous episode, it wasn't particularly successful, but did show that the carp, until disturbed too much by the light, were much more sedentary during darkness than they were in the day, although the rudd, as usual, continued to swim their circuits. This is into the first week of January now, and the temps in the pond were around 1 to 3 degrees, and the carp and tench were spending much more time nestled together at the bottom of the pond. When separated into species groups, the tench have started to prefer to rest in the shallower half of the pond, although, as we'll see later, the carp have started to follow suit. Although clearly affected by these much lower temps, the carp remain more active than the tench and seem unable to remain sedentary for too long. As we see in this speeded up footage, Judy, the larger female tench, in particular prefers to rest completely on the bottom of the pond, whereas the carp appear much more motivated to explore. The younger tench aren't always sure who to stick with, but usually go back to Judy. The younger ones also get bumped about by the carp more, and Judy remains quite unaffected by them. It's her pond after all. Aside from showing the messy corner of the pond that I really need to sort out once the water's a bit warmer, this clip shows the personality and nature of the fish quite succinctly. The cold is forcing the larger fish to become less active on the bottom of the pond, the tench especially, but even Koira at this time as well. Yet Mira can't help but explore around, and the rudd, well, they continue with their circuit training. The rudd. In spite of not completing any observed feeding, they continue to be permanently on the go, shoaling closer together and doing a partial circuit of the pond, mostly quite close to the surface. They are swimming more slowly, however, with even this speeded up footage appearing to be only as fast as their usual summer pace. Judy gives the impression of just wanting to hibernate until winter's over, except that whenever she gets comfortable on the pond floor, those annoying carp and younger tench keep waking her up. I think she would definitely prefer to have the pond to herself sometimes, anthropomorphising though I know this may be. The last section of this month's Underwater Watch shows a somewhat surprising behaviour the fish have been engaged in. There's a school, no pun, of thought that fish will find the deeper water in winter as it is warmer, and while this is true of larger bodies of water, like lakes, it doesn't really work in garden ponds, as the range of depth don't really allow for any significant warm or cold spots. The tench and carp in my pond have begun, since the much colder weather, to spend an increasing amount of time in the shallowest part of the pond, the rear right hand corner. There's a number of possible reasons I've considered for this. Firstly, that's directly where the water returns from the filters, and although my pond has no heating, is the water slightly warmer after being through the pump and filtration? Seems unlikely. The next idea is that it's the first area of the pond to get any sunlight, and therefore it will warm up a little sooner. Again, I would think this would be negligible, so again, I'm not sure. Lastly, flow. There's flow throughout the water, but actually directly beneath the filter and skimmer returns, there is a less volatile spot, hence why leaves often collect in that area. So maybe the fish gather here as it's easier to be inactive in the slacker water. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this and any other observations you have had. I have a number of projects, both big and small, for this year, two of which involve filtration. One, the new moving bed, is a work in progress. The second, using filter floss, is under testing. The moving bed I'll cover in full when it's somewhat operational. The filter floss I'll update as I try it out. So, I started with some cheap floss, that was a bit of a mistake purchase. I then replaced it with some more suitable floss and have left it in for a week. A few notes before seeing how it's gone. First, I'm using it in the skimmer, as there's no good place to position it in the multi-bay without risking the system overflowing. Second, it's obviously a time of low detritus, so any findings need to be tempered with that knowledge. Lastly, what's its aim? Well, to reduce the large amounts of fines in the water without restricting the effectiveness of the skimmer. Right, so after a week I removed the floss to have a look. As you can see, it was quite dirty, not as much as I'd have thought, or as much as it would be in one day in the summer, but it had obviously collected a fair amount. Visually at least, the water has looked beautifully clear over the last 10 days. However, there's three things that have changed during this time. 1. I've used the pond vac a number of times. 2. The fish have not been fed. And 3. I've started using the floss. Therefore, it could be any one of them that have improved the water clarity, or, more likely, all three together. However, I think the state of the floss indicates that it's more than pulling its weight. The other factor to consider is how well the skimmer is working. Again, visually, there doesn't seem to be any difference in flow rate, and it appears to be collecting the usual floating detritus, although again, it's not particularly prevalent at this time of year. Obviously, when the floss collects more muck and gets blocked, the flow will suffer and the skimmer will become less effective, meaning I'll need to do a lot more changing and cleaning of the floss to keep everything running efficiently. I'll give it till about autumn and see if it's worth the extra work. I began the channel in July 2020. Like lots of people, it was in part influenced by lockdown and a need to have some kind of creative outlet and hobby, as well as a means of documenting the life of my pond. It was as much motivated by the idea of making videos as it was by pond keeping, certainly to begin with anyway. I didn't realise the positive effect making videos would have on how well I looked after the pond. I became a lot more organised and keen to look for interesting developments and ways to view the pond. I started off knowing that I wasn't going to appear in front of camera and actually was quite reluctant to even do a voiceover, but it seemed the least I could do. Anyway, I started with a brief 2-video explanation of how I built my pond, twice, which was a little video light as I'd not planned to have a YouTube channel when I'd built it, so it was mainly just a slideshow. At this point I had plans for about 2 more videos and was somewhat worried that I'd, as I believe YouTube creators say, run out of content. I needn't have worried as it turned out, and topics came along through the natural life of the pond and work and projects that had to be completed. In fact, I sometimes put off work, or at least complete it, but put off including it until a future episode. So, in the first 6 months of the channel I've made 26 weekly episodes, 27 ad hoc clip videos, 1 clips compilation video, 5 videos for a retro series, 3 trailers, 1 Christmas greetings video and 1 re-upload due to copyright issues. Therefore, 64 video uploads, and at the time of making this video I'm at 59 subs, which is at least 50 more than I thought I'd get. I certainly didn't set this channel up with the expectation that I'd have thousands of subs and views and I'd be set for life. I think there's very few fish keeping channels that achieve that, and certainly my slightly niche tiny pond that's got an only partially competent keeper was never going to be that big of a draw. Still, I'm delighted with how the channel's going. I definitely get enough views and comments to feel that people are watching. Although, I must say that I'd probably carry on regardless anyway, because I really enjoy editing videos and the overall creative aspect of it. I'd welcome any suggestions you may have for the channel as a whole, or for particular videos. I'm open to anything really, even getting in front of the camera. Well, maybe not that, not quite yet. Anyway, please leave your thoughts in the comment section below. One could be for me to stop saying anyway so much, maybe. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Keeping Water. I really do appreciate it. Please like and share if you've enjoyed it, and post any feedback or questions you have in the comments section below. Next week's episode is not fully decided, but I will be taking a look at updating the herring fence, giving another update on water tests, and looking at ways to improve the sound and vision of my videos, and maybe some other as yet undecided topics. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.